Hello and welcome to our today's Coffee and Consulting. My name is Friederike Ruch and I have the honor to be your today's host. We have the topic today about business trips and practical insights. And if I just look outside the window and see the very clear blue sky, I can actually not think about anything better than a kind of a business trip to Switzerland, for example. So I hope you all had a very nice weekend. You have your tea or your coffee, and we can start with the today's topic. Before we start, as usual, you're all unmute. So whenever you have any questions or also questions you really thought about before our coffee and consulting event, then just drop them down in the question box. And if we still have some time left, we will definitely answer them right there. Then after the couple of slides I would like to go through with you. Otherwise, you will receive an email back from us. Also during the presentation, you can still write down all your questions you have. And as said, either we still have time and we will answer them afterwards, or otherwise we will get back to you. I think in actually any firm, I was talking to people, to HR people, or actually also business people, they have and they see that business travel is a bit of an issue, or better to say, it's kind of sometimes you know that you have it, and you know if you actually opens the Pandora box kind of, then lots of things will come up, so you rather actually keep the box closed. And I think that is with the business travel part. Now, seeing what the situation is today and what is so a bit the outlook for the next couple of years, I strongly believe that companies really need to look at business travelers, business trip a little closer, because there is a bit of a compliance risk attached to it. And we, as a start, we just would like to go with the little sample, like Sarah Peter is employed by Zurich Engineer Ltd in Zurich, and she wants now to travel for 5 days to work on a project. And I think that is kind of something which in every firm, the one or the other way will come up. And there are lots of questions usually will be asked. Is that an immigration matter? So does she need a work permit when she's going to the project? Is there any employment law exposure on it? What is about tax? What is about social security? Are there any additional costs involved? And then what are the responsibilities and liabilities? And if we are honest to each other, the business trip, it's now just for 5 days, but in principle, it is viewed as any other assignment. We just have, in addition, to consider that business trips are shorter, occur much more often, as well as are not as planned like assignments the one or the other way. Therefore, you need to be much quicker and faster with being able to provide a solution to it. Therefore, I think the internal processes itself are actually key to it, to see how best you can try to get the business trips or business travelers actually on the right foot. On the right-hand side on that slide, you will, sorry, you see a little sketch on how the business trip usually looks like. So always someone is employed in country A, goes to, or actually, yeah, country A goes to a trip outside of country A for a limited period of time. The individual will never have a residence there, and then he just goes after he has finished whatever he was doing in the other country. He's coming back. There is usually no change in employment, no change in payroll, no change in payment, no change in residency, but still there are a couple of issues which we have to look at. And therefore, we made that small comparison between business trip and assignment postings. So the assignment compared to the business trip is basically it's for a longer duration. Usually there is an additional, either an addendum to the current contract or even an assignment contract drafted. Sometimes that also has some implication on the payroll matter. Whereas the business trip is basically everything remains and stays as it is today. Independent on the business trip itself, the key part is also about what kind of tasks or activities, better to say, will the individual then perform while being on the business trip. Is it signing contracts, or is it just about negotiation of price conditions? Whether he has actually a team abroad and therefore is traveling to the other country because of meeting with his team, working on a project, or actually really working already at a client site. So depending a bit on the type of activity, there might be then, if we look at least if we look at the tax as well as immigration, there will be the one or the other consequence triggered by it. From a social security point of view, that has not much of an influence. However, it is also quite good if you think about drafting a business traveler policy to raise an awareness of it. So we know what a business trip, so we are all on the same page about how a business trip, or what we understand at a business trip. And I think the first part is really the perception that I have a business trip, therefore I'm allowed to work, is actually completely wrong. And also, what is also sometimes we hear quite often, oh, I'm only going there for meetings, therefore there's no need to have a work permit for that. Now, the thing is, and the typical answer you might get from someone who is dealing with the immigration in the country he is traveling to will be, it depends. It's quite possible that someone who only goes for meetings to the different country will not need a work permit, might only need a business visa, depending on the nationality, or actually do not need anything at all. But it is something which the country, the individual is working in for or is the business trip going to. That's the country which determines then whether there is a need of the permit or not. And also, if you deal with immigration, then just saying the employee will only go there for attending meetings is not sufficient, because it depends a bit on what kind of meetings are it. Is it just sharing information, or is it the kick-off meeting of a project work? So depending a bit on what type of meeting it is, there's also then you will get different answer in regards to meeting. My main point on that slide is really to first of all, to get across, it's always necessary to have a bit of more background information in order to verify which way is the right way, and to avoid that the perception people have that a business visa is also equals a work permit, that is actually not true. A business visa only allows someone to actually travel to the other country and is only needed based on a nationality where you actually will otherwise be declined to enter the other country. To also be quite clear on that, you will find in Switzerland, but that is also true with lots of other countries, there is an massive increase in, first of all, the checking when people travel to a country as well as traveling back to their home country. So when crossing the border, there is a increase on checking on it, as well as labor market controls in the different countries have also increased. Also in Switzerland, it kind of has doubled from last year's. So this is something where you need to be aware of, as well as what you also need to be aware of is that because of our technology and the way data can be shared, it is quite easy that the data will not just be shared with whatever kind of authority you have shared it. It might go one step ahead as well. And that is for me, if you think about that, someone is frequently has to go on business trips to, for example, from Switzerland to Germany, you will get for the individual an A1, so there's no problem at all with that. Now, the information will, for the moment, staying with the Social Security Authority. However, there is not much needed and required that information will actually go beyond and go directly to the immigration authority as well as the tax authority. In Switzerland as well, the information at the moment at least is, as far as I know, not shared, but I think there is not much needed then that at some point it will be shared. And if that's the case, then we need to have everything ready to be compliant also then in immigration, because that's the first check the authority usually are doing. Now, what happens if we haven't requested the work permit, we haven't done anything, but we know in the end we should have. That a business traveler is still traveling to the other country. So the consequences are usually that there's a fine, either just to the company or to the employee as well. It then leads, but that is not coming up with the first time you've done something wrong. There is the consequence of entry bans, as well as that leads then to project delays, maybe also the company, the host company, or home company, better to say, might be banned, or there might be additional consequences. But in the first step, it's usually just a fine. Now, if we do want to make everything right, so what do we need to do? Because in the end, we need to prepare ourselves and see how can we best implement it in our busy world to make sure that nothing happens, or at least the risk is as low as possible. And the best thing would be to see in your own firm what kind of possibilities you have that you can get the information of those business traveler in order to check the country they go to, the purpose of their visit, the activities, the duration, and then to see whether you can kind of make an internal rule that no travel approval means no travel. So based on that, to also change a bit of the mindset and say, you know, we need to be compliant. In the end, every company tries to do that as best as possible. Will you be able to be 100% compliant in that regard? Most likely not. But you only can actually achieve it if you change the mindset as well as to have a kind of an use technology as best as possible, so to make it as easy as possible to get everything done. And I think today there are already quite some things or tools you can use which makes it much easier. Taxation. There's also the common myth that someone is in the other country below 183 days, and then that means automatically there is no taxation. So that is also not always true. It depends a bit on the circumstances, and usually people back that up with the Article 15, and that is also true. That is the article which you find in almost in all the double tax treaty we have. However, the phrase of how the 183 days rule really is different. And one of the key things where it is different is the calculation of the days. Now, also, we hear lots of times in our daily practice that they just view the working days and count the working days for the 183 days, which is actually not true. You have to look at every day the individual is spending in the other country, and all the days actually are counting towards the 183 days. Now, the 183 days is not the only thing. You also have to make sure that there is no payment of salary, which usually is also not done, at least not with a business traveler, because the business traveler usually gets his salary from his home entity where he's employed with. There's usually no charging to another legal entity. And then the next part is that there is also no cost being borne at the legal entity in the host destination. And that is usually something which is not always completely true, because sometimes then hotel cost or any kind of local cost will be borne by the host entity. And with that, you may already then trigger the tax implication in the host entity or in the host country. Therefore, you need to be quite strict with it and have a good guideline in how many days someone is allowed to work in the other country. See about that there is no recharging, as well as that no cost will be really borne in the other country. And only then, if all three conditions are met, only then you can avoid having the taxation in the other country. Coming back to the calculation of the 183 days, there are double tax treaty which will calculate the 183 days in a calendar year. That is what, for example, Switzerland is doing. Or it can be in a tax year, and the tax year does not necessarily mean it's the calendar year, as well as it can be in a 12-month period, which One of the examples is the US, where you will find that it's always calculated in a 12 months rolling period. Also, in addition to that 183 days rule, you may have already heard there are countries which have an economic employer principle, like Germany, for example, or Switzerland has the factual employer principle. So even all those three conditions are completely met, everything is good. There's another hurdle now, which the tax authorities have implemented not in all countries, but in a lot of countries already, where then taxation still kicks in. Even someone might only be there for 20 days. If, for example, the factual employer principle is met, then the taxation can also already kick in starting from the first day. There are then the consequence of payroll withholding obligations in the country, or might be, as well as there might be a corporate tax exposure as well. If you think about your one of the members of the management who has signing powers in the legal entity is actually going on business trips, and that frequently, for example, to Germany from Switzerland, and he's then signing documents wherever he is, because, for example, you use the service DocuSign, which is easy. You can just do that online on the internet, through the internet. While he is in Germany, he just will do that. With that, basically, there is the risk creating that there is a tax exposure. Now, if the individual is doing that just one time, nobody will actually take it up. But there's a risk to it. And sometimes it's then just not one time. It's if then people are going more frequently to the other country, then it increases the level of risk. Social Security is usually the easiest thing in regard to business traveler. That's really the main or key thing, to make sure people have the right certificate when when going to the other country, like the A1 or the certificate of coverage if we are outside of the EU region. In addition, the only thing which we usually advise to look at the health insurance coverage, to make sure there is an international coverage in case someone also will be stuck, get stuck in the other country, so that they can have the access to the medical services there without any issue or problems. And as said, which the meaning behind hidden trigger is that the information the authority then has with filing the A1s or a certificate of coverage can go quite easily then to the other authorities as well. And we know that if you have longer term assignments, then already the information from the Social Security goes to the health insurance, for example, as well as to the tax authority. So be aware that at some point, that might be for any traveler going from A to B, you might have that issue. In addition to those topics we just discussed are employment law and duty of care matters. I just want to pick out a couple of things which I think are quite relevant, and we also have those discussions quite often with our clients. And one thing is those mandatory labor law requirements. If you send someone, for example, from France to Switzerland to work here for 2 to 3 days, he will be coming here for meetings with clients, and you hope that in the end you will actually get a contract with the client. Now, one thing is that you say it's just negotiation meetings, so it's not really a work permit required, which I agree on. Social security wise, you would actually request the A1 for him because he's traveling for 3 days to Switzerland. Tax wise, might be no change in the taxation. He still might will be subject to French taxation while he is for those 3 days in Switzerland, because there are no cost charged to here. There will be no salary paid out in Switzerland, so that is easy. In regard to working, however, even I don't need a work permit or anything else, I still need to consider the Swiss labor law requirements. So I still have to look at work hours, breaks, as well as the salary requirements. So based on that, for those 3 days, even the Swiss salary level needs to be considered. And then in addition, any kind of expenses reimbursements based on Swiss law would actually have also to be considered. Even though we don't need a work permit, that does not mean we do not have to look at those laws. And that is also the meaning behind it. Wherever or whenever you send someone to the other country, you would have to look up what the legal requirements are in the country of destination. Health and safety, I think that is just really providing some guidance, assess the destination risks, see what risks there are, looking at the majority of business travelers. That might be the point where you could put kind of at the end of it. Liability, clearly also something you need to look at from an corporate perspective at it, and make sure you apply the local rules, and that people understand when they travel to the other country what kind of rules they have to consider and make sure to be in line with. So looking at all these different aspects and and topics, what can you now do to make sure you stay compliant or you become compliant in regard to those business travelers? And I think one thing is definitely to try to define a clear business travel policy. See what is best, what would work best in your firm. That doesn't mean it needs to be a 50-page document. Usually you might be able to get that down to 4 or 5 pages, but put in the different steps to it. Try to make always a kind of a pre-trip risk assessment. And if it's something goes on a longer term, the business trip, then maybe you should really look at the full legal assessment. And then you can also, I think, quite easily define kind of categories and think about your business travelers. What are they doing? I mean, you don't have to include everything you know. You just have to really define the topics and the matters in your own firm. With the clear business travel policy should include all the different topics for permit, visa, maybe how to book travels, and then also some of the travel booking carriers, you can actually request the data, so to do some reporting and see where people are going, to make sure you can actually do in advance, actually see to have information on hand as well. Looking at withholding requirements, tax and social security stuff, to make for each of these elements a kind of a process, put that down, and you see that it works quite well. As well as to see and define your process internally, because there are different functions who need to work together, like the immigration and tax and payroll and social security. But I think one of the key topics is to definitely make sure you have someone or one function who is actually responsible for that group of employee, because otherwise, if nobody feels responsible for it, we see that that usually is then the part where it can actually fail. I also brought, to kind of sum up what we just discussed, a short sample where we can just quickly go through the different elements. Maria is a Swiss national. She's a sales manager. She's based in Zurich and employed at Zurich Dental Inc. Now, she needs to travel to France to negotiate some contracts with clients. She will work from the French subsidiary office, but there are no costs charged. Salary is completely paid in Switzerland, and let's say also no expenses will be paid from the French authority, French office. Now, immigration. Even she's just negotiating of contracts. There is a CIPSI notification required in France. You need that as well for any kind of business meetings. Therefore, that is a bit different than in Switzerland, so you need to do that. Social security-wise, you will have to file and request an A1 certificate for her. She's Swiss national, going to France for the days she is then there. She will be remaining in the Swiss social security system and being completely exempted from the French one. Taxation. If there is, the cost will be charged to the French entity. Therefore, there's French taxation on the French workdays, and otherwise you remain unlimited taxed in Switzerland. Labor law. Mandatory French requirements are applicable to whatever is then, wherever she is better off with the French ones towards the Swiss ones, the French will actually come into place. Expenses need to be covered based on our own law, like food, travel, and lodging. Payroll. She can remain on the Swiss payroll. However, because of her taxation in France, there's a shadow payroll in France required as well. Now, if we see to get at least the taxation maybe away, then there is less hassle on it. And maybe most of the business trips will actually fall also into that category. However, you still need to look at each of the elements, and that should show you that kind of the pre-assessment on each trip might be really good in order to make sure you are then compliant. And maybe you can find define certain categories in your firm to see where there might be a quick assessment is fully okay, or where you actually have to really go to the full length to it. Now, what should you take away with you? Definitely, short does not mean risk-free. You, in order to be compliant, you should have a visible process and a process in line, so that you definitely get back to track, or get back on track, better to say, and have a good compliant way forward. We think a a well-defined travel policy checklist and some assessment tools might be quite helpful and might be the way in order to ensure that everything is in line. And here we have put down a couple of questions you maybe will have to think about whether you can make a kind of an approval process for a business trip. We are already quite at the end, at least a couple of minutes already above 30 minutes. So I will check the questions later on and then get back to you afterwards. Before we close, thank you very much for your attention. I would like to just quickly draw your attention also to our next webinar, which is about global teams, local rules. It's a seminar we hold on the 19th of March at the Bauer Lack, which will be in German only. Then we have our next webinar, which is about business trips, where we go a bit closer and in more detail about the compliance aspect, which is on the 24th of February. And then also I would like to invite you to our next Coffee and Consulting, which is already on the 9th of March, which is about the topic remote working. I hope you enjoyed today, and I just thank you very much for your attention and hope to see you soon at one of our next events. Thank you very much.